Ministry was never really meant to be mechanical. It was always meant to be relational. We are in a world where if we're not careful, we will allow systems and structures and strategies to become the forefront of everything that we say and do. Somehow in the process, we forget the most important thing that we do, and that is about people.
There's a temptation to build such a phenomenal program that you in turn just leave people in the dust. When you're doing those budget meetings, when you're planning that event, when you're balancing your calendar, you always have to ask yourself, how is this going to build my people?
In his itinerant ministry, Jesus always made his life about relational ministry. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Between the Trenches with Pastor Justin Pratt, and today I want to speak to something that is near and dear, should be near and dear to the heart of every single church, every ministry that you could imagine, and that is we want to talk about the importance that ministry was never really meant to be mechanical. It was always meant to be relational. And today I've got Pastor Sean with us. Sean serves as our student pastor here at Clear Springs Baptist Church, and we're going to talk a little bit about not just ministry relational in the church in general, but we're going to relate this a little bit to teen ministry and what that looks like. And the truth is, Brother Sean, we are in a world where if we're not careful, we will allow systems and structures and strategies to become the forefront of everything that we say and do. And somehow in the process, we forget the most important thing that we do, and that is about people.
Yeah, I think there's a temptation to, in a sense, build such a phenomenal program that you in turn just leave people in the dust. And I think the heartbeat of every ministry should just be this: it's people over programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And the truth of the matter is, I'll start the program immediately by saying that if you study the life of Jesus, one of the amazing things about his life, if you study it, is that in his itinerant ministry, Jesus always made his life about relational ministry. He took 12 disciples amongst the masses and he invested into them on a smaller level. Then he took 3 men out of that 12, and you could often find them in a place with Jesus where they were kind of isolated. And then even there, you could dial it down to John. I mean, every time we find John, he's right in the bosom of Jesus, and he's spending time with him. And so Jesus is a beautiful epitome of what it looks like to build a relational ministry. And we want to talk a little bit about that today and remind ourselves that it's got to always be people over programs. And that's not just true in youth ministry, but it's true across the board. And so Sean will speak a little bit about that for those youth pastors that may be listening today about, a lot of times, Sean, people think that youth programming's got to be all about the program. It's about the next big event. How can we draw the crowd? What games can we play that keep them on the edge? And as you mentioned a moment ago, we forget and neglect the most important part, and that is those boys and girls that represent souls.
Yeah, I kind of want to start by being really, really transparent. I think I've had moments in youth ministry, especially early on, where there's so much emphasis on just having fun. And I remember even in college thinking, like, man, youth ministry is all about how can we run a fun youth activity? How can we just have a fun atmosphere? But then you get into the trenches of it, literally, and you start to realize, like, you're dealing with young people who have problems. You're dealing with real life issues. And so it's so much more.
And those problems are so much more complex than what we think.
Oh, yeah,
and we just think it's like a breakup with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or we think it's just kid problems. They didn't make the middle school basketball team. But the day in which we live, it's those complexities they're crazy.
Oh, yeah. And I think you have to understand that even at 15, a kid nowadays, they deal with depression. They deal with anxiety. They deal with trauma.
Sure.
And as leaders, we have got to be in position to walk through those things with them, not just get them to a place where everything is fun.
Yeah. And so we're going to kind of we're just going to kind of flesh through some practical ways that you can make sure that people are at the forefront. And by the way, if you're a business owner, the principle's still the same. You have to make it about the employees that work with you and for you. You have to make it about the patrons who patronize your place of employment. They use your services. They use your goods. And if everything is only a strategy or a system and you miss people in the process, I think we're missing what God put us on this earth for. And so as we kind of just go through this, we're going to talk about some of the practical ways that you as a pastor, a business leader, an elementary school principal. I mean, we could go through this. And look, we don't profess to be professionals at this because there are weeks where at the end of the day, we've got boxes we have to check. We've got deadlines we have to meet. We have meetings we have to be at. And if we're not careful, we will forget about, Harry, who is going through a life crisis and just needs the attention of his pastor, or Pam, who was put in the hospital. And so please don't get any idea that we're claiming that we are professionals at this. We have all the right answers, but I think that there are some practical ways that we can do this. And I'm going to kind of let Sean start out by just talking about some of the practical ways that we can value people over programs.
Yeah, I think if we start with this one is probably, of all the things we're going to talk about, the one that I find is really near and dear to my heart. And that's just simply learning someone's name.
Wow.
And I remember just many times through the years where someone would come one time and they might sit in the back, they might kind of hide, but then when they realize that the person standing at the front of the room sees them as a person, not just a number that's filling up a room or just someone that's gonna check a box, like they see you as an individual, that to me makes a person feel extremely special.
Yeah. So when I came to Clear Springs 8 years ago, one of the greatest challenges was for me, especially with a lot of new growth. The Lord bless, people begin to come. And for anybody that's ever visited our church, they know that one of the things I do, I go stand in the foyer and I shake hands, and I'm typically, I will make an honest admission, I am not the first one in the building, but I am usually always one, if not the last one to leave the building. And in large part, it's because I'm standing in our foyer. I'm trying to connect with people, our church members, our visitors. But one of the things that I challenged myself to, Sean, was I was determined I'm going to learn every name that I can. And sometimes I found creative ways to do that. If I could remember a family's last name, then I may cover 4, 5, 6 people in one by just calling. And there's been times where they're leaving and I say, hey, Mr. and Miss Smith, baby Smith, how are you? And the truth is, I don't always initially remember that first name right out of the gate. But if you can call a person by their name and you can recollect that, it tells them exactly what you just said. I'm not just a face in the crowd. I'm not just a number in the building. He actually took the time. And I can remember sitting at my desk at times. And at that time, we were probably running 600-700 people. But I would sit at my desk and I would go through the church directory. And I would literally try my best to put a face with the name. And I kind of pride myself on it. And I will not profess that I know every name. But there's not a lot of names that leave our church on a Sunday morning that I don't remember their name. And you'll call them by name, shake their hand, say, hey, Patrick, I hope you have a great week this week. And sometimes their jaw drops like, how did you remember my name? And so I agree with you. You transitioned from smaller youth group to a larger youth group. How have you kind of found creative ways that you could kind of facilitate remembering, 100, 120 kids' names on a weekend basis? How do you go about that?
Well, I would start off by saying I feel like God has given me a natural ability to learn names and remember them. That's not to say in a youth ministry that's fairly large, it hasn't been challenging. But I can say right out of the rip, I remember when we did our interview in front of the church, you kind of had mentioned that. And in my mind, the first thing I thought was, I'm taking the challenge. Like, how can I learn as many names as possible? And I think a lot of it is just relating a characteristic about them, sharing a personal story with them, developing some sort of connection that when you think of their name, there's something about that interaction with them that kind of sparks that memory.
Yeah.
And what you have to realize is to all of the people in your ministry, you're one person, but to you, they're a bunch of people. So learning someone's name is going to help you kind of make a large organization feel really small. And I think people feel important when they feel like they're a real person. And you look at how Jesus ran his ministry, when he called Philip, when he called Matthew, when he called Peter, he knew their name. And I think that's why when he was able to go follow me, there wasn't a lot of hesitation.
Yeah.
Because he knew them already.
Yeah, and I'm not certain that those men that you just mentioned were they perhaps could have started as just followers of Jesus who were in the crowd. They were there to see the miracles, but he saw something in them. He learned who they were. And you're right. He called them by name, and that makes a massive difference. So if you're keeping notes and you're trying to remember these things, ways to value people over programs is, number one, you know their name. Secondly, a big one is know their story. That know a little bit about them. Know where they came from. We've often heard it said, you've heard it, I've heard it, we've all heard it, every listener's heard this, that people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And one of the ways that we can display a very clear message to people that they matter to us is when we sell the message to them that I don't want to just know your name, but I want to know the nature behind who you are. Where did you come from? Tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us a little bit about your history. And that becomes extremely valuable. I'll say more about that in a moment, but it becomes valuable because if you know a person's story and you know a little bit about their background, then it gives you the chance to be a little more relatable with their life and what they're going through. So knowing their story is a big deal.
Absolutely. I can think back to a very specific instance. The first time I attended church, I caused a little bit of trouble. And I remember the man who to this day is one of the most important people.
And for clarity, so our listeners know, bus kid, right?
Bus ministry.
Bus
absolutely.
ministry kid brought in by a church that saw the necessity of bringing kids that didn't have a shot to be in church. And so
inner city to whatever you can imagine that looks like. That's how I grew up.
Yep.
And I remember I caused a little bit of trouble. And this man's name is Bill. He just pulled me to the side and he spoke to my heart. And one of the ways he did that was he just related his understanding of my situation. And I felt like I could trust this person because he knew where I was coming from.
Yeah.
I wasn't just a generic person that sat in a seat. Like he knew and understood exactly what made me tick, why my behavior was the way it was, and what triggered me. And so I think if you're really trying to make a ministry feel small, if you're trying to put people over building a program, when you speak to a person, knowing the context by which they are in your office or the context by which they're sitting in their seat, what brought them in? What did it take to get them in that seat?
Yeah.
That is going to pay dividends.
Yeah, it does, for sure. I think if we could go ahead and speak in, we're going to tether our third thought, not just know their name and know their story, but I want to tether the third thought to that same one. And I got a couple of examples that I'll use, and that is to notice them. Just notice them. Let them be recognized. They're in the room. They're in our presence. We don't walk by them as if they're non-existent or there's some ghost standing in the hallway of the church. But we kind of be in the moment. I learned this from one of my best mentors, William Boyd Bingham, out of Middlesboro, Kentucky. He would literally give the most undervalued people in the world a fair chance to be in the moment. And he never looked past them. He was never looking to the next conversation. And I witnessed this even as a teenager watching his life. And one of the things that I loved about him that I often would say, I want to emulate that. I want people, and it's hard sometimes. It's hard because let's be honest. I'm not trying to be comical. I'm being real because this is raw truth and real talk. Sometimes some people get on your nerves. They can drive you up a wall. I bet there's probably no teenagers in a youth group that drive a youth pastor crazy though, right? You want to digress on that conversation, probably. We will not call names in this segment, but at the end of the day, there are people who absolutely, if we could be real, we could be raw. Every pastor listening to this podcast, every business owner listening to this podcast right now is saying, amen, preacher. There are people that absolutely get on your nerves, but they still need to be noticed. Give two examples, and I'm going to let you speak about noticing people for a moment. One of them is the story of Edward Kimball. Some people recognize that name immediately. Immediately it connects because they know who he is. Others that are listening, here's the story of Edward Kimball. He was a Sunday school teacher outside of Chicago, Illinois. Edward Kimball was a faithful man. He loved God. He loved the class that he taught. There was a young man in his class one day that was publicly embarrassed because of his lack of ability to know how to find a Bible verse. And out of that embarrassment, the little boy, as I understand the story, I could be corrected on some of this, deemed that he would never go back to Sunday school again. But Edward Kimball made it his mission to reach that young man, to notice that young man. Found him at a shoe store. And I said Chicago. I meant Boston. I'm sorry. Chicago's where he wound up the rest of his life, but it was in Boston, Massachusetts. Found a shoe store in Boston, Massachusetts. And because he noticed this young man and he gave him attention, and he intentionally gave him attention, He had the privilege to end up leading a young man by the name of Dwight Layman Moody to the Lord, and D.L. Moody got saved. And I've been to Boston, Massachusetts, where there's a plaque in the middle of such what we would consider a pagan city that indicates this is the spot where Edward Kimball led D.L. Moody, the great revivalist, to saving faith in Jesus Christ. Is because he noticed him. He recognized him. On the flip side, I've often heard the story rehearsed, and I don't remember all of the details, but another young man was brought into the church. He was in a single mom's home. He didn't get to have the fair privilege of growing up in a home where mom and dad were both taking him to church, and kind of like your situation, he was brought into the church, and he was unruly. He got in trouble, and the Sunday school teacher didn't notice him. As a matter of fact, she was very cruel to him, is my understanding, and that little boy went home, made a commitment that he would never go to church again because nobody noticed him. And that little boy became Lee Harvey Oswald. And so there's two sides of the fence there. And the difference was simply built on this very truth. If you notice people, if you notice that teenager, if you notice that single mom, if you notice that guy in your church whose skin color maybe looks different than what yours does, if you look at that person, and we have it all the time at our church, that mom trying to raise a special needs child, that it's obvious they're coming from a poverty-stricken situation. They're not wearing the appropriate church. Just notice those people. Give them a little bit of attention. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I love so much about what you said. Let's speak to noticing the people that just haven't been around. One of the things I love to do is when there's maybe a young man who just has been absent for a few weeks, and then they show up, I like to send them a text. Like they may not even know who's watching. They may walk into that church and wonder who's even caring that I'm not here.
Sure.
And when they know that there is someone who absolutely is concerned when they're not there, but equally as concerned that they're back, I think that makes someone feel so important.
It does.
So seen, and ultimately so noticed. And to relate this back to Jesus' ministry, he was absolutely great at that.
Yeah. Yeah, and to speak into that for the average church member that's listening to this podcast, you're not a pastor. You're not a youth pastor. You're not a discipleship pastor. You're not on some care team. Let me tell you how this fleshes out for you in just common everyday, because this is a podcast on not just ministry and leadership. This is a podcast on life. And every time that you walk into your church on the average Sunday morning, there's somebody else walking through those church doors and sitting on the other end of the pew that you're sitting on that's facing hell by the acre. They've just buried a spouse. They're contemplating suicide. They have a prodigal son or daughter that they are extremely burdened about. They have a marriage that's going south quick and it looks like it's going to end in divorce. Or somebody they love just got a diagnosis of cancer that doesn't look good. And I think it's really important, Sean, for the average church member to realize that who the pastor and the youth pastor and the connect pastor may not be able to connect with on a Sunday morning, by just simply putting a smile on your face and noticing the guy or the girl that's sitting on there. We don't know how people walk into the building. We don't know what, and especially when it's a visitor and you don't know who they are. Why did they come to our church? Was there a mitigating circumstance that led them to that moment that said, you know what, this is my last shot. This is my last desire to find some hope. And if they walk in and sit on a pew, and because of what they wear or what they look like or even what they smell like, they don't know all the behavior that happens. And I get it. Church has got to be done with decency and order. But if you just take a moment to recognize them, to notice them as we're talking about, it could become a life-changing, life-altering moment for somebody. And I try to teach our church often. I don't say it every Sunday, but we don't know what people are going through when they walk in our doors. And God may strategically put that person on the other end of your pew or in your church section so that when they're given that chance for you to put your hand in theirs, to put your arms around their neck and just simply say, thank you for being here. I love you. I'm glad you came. It is a game changer when you notice people.
Yeah, and I think if we kind of bring back in the heartbeat of what we're talking about today, we just have to understand what we get people with is how we're going to keep them, right? And if we're drawing people in with massive programs and ambiance, that's what we have to do to keep them to stay, and that's not always feasible. Sure. But when people are coming because they feel loved, they feel noticed, they sat in the corner and someone took time to learn their name and their story, that is literally, I believe, the heartbeat of what Jesus' ministry was.
Yes.
And I think if we do it the same way Jesus did it, we're onto something.
Yeah. When people are noticed, then they feel valued.
Mm-hmm.
And when they feel valued, then what ends up happening, they end up telling themselves, if they care about me, this is the kind of place I want to be connected to. Because there's an innate desire in every single person that they want to be known, they want to be loved. They can pretend they want to be a hermit. They can pretend that I recently had an opportunity to talk with a young lady at our church with her father. Her father said, look, she's crying, she's weeping. I can't even get her to talk to me. And it took me a good 3 or 4 minutes to get her to break down enough to look up at me. But when she finally lifted her head and the tears began to roll beneath her glasses and literally drip into the carpet of our church, what she realized is that this guy really does value me. He notices me. He knew my name. He knew my name. He knows a little bit about my story. I happen to know that this young lady, she doesn't, at the time, she didn't believe in God. And at the end of the day, when she knew that she was valued, then all of a sudden it brought a connection between her and I, and she began to talk to me. And I think that what happens is that when we value them and they feel like they're connected, then they feel a sense of belonging. And it shuts the back door to people that lead your ministry. I really believe one of the most simple things that pastors can do or youth pastors can do in their ministries is to exactly what we're talking about. Make the people more important to the program, love them and value them, make them feel recognized and noticed, and they're going to stay around if for no other reason. They feel like it's a place that they belong to. And that's what church is about. It's about belonging, and it can't just always be about building, but it's creating an atmosphere where people can actually feel like I have a family outside of the people that God gave me that share my genetics. I share spiritual genetics with somebody, and I have a family, and it's called my church.
It's called a community.
It's community.
And I think that's such a big part of ministry. So now someone's come through your doors, you've learned their name, you've gotten to know their story, you've noticed them. Now, how do you continue to nurture that relationship?
Nurture is a big word. It's a big word because if all I ever do is notice them, but I never nurtured them, then I'm not giving them intentionality. Now, obviously, you and I both understand that in growing ministries, in growing youth ministries, if you are leading a growing business, it's very hard for the guy who sits at the top to be able to nurture every single relationship. And so I think one of the things that we do in order to speak life into them is I think what we realize is that we have to enlist and equip people that can assist us in doing that. For you, it looks like a team of youth workers. And so speak to that for a moment. Obviously, we're all still learning, and we're all in a learning process. But kind of talk a little bit about what, and I know this is not about systems, this is about people, but what does some of the systems look like in a growing youth ministry, that struggling youth pastor who all of a sudden there's this onslaught of new kids coming in, but he doesn't feel like he can connect with all 40 of them anymore. What's some ways that he can do that so he can still nurture relationships by equipping others to do the work of the ministry?
Well, I think you look exactly at what Jesus did. Jesus could not, just like we could not, and I say this, I hope you understand my heart in this. Jesus as a man could not do with hundreds of thousands what he did with 12. But when before he went back to heaven, before he ascended back to heaven, he left his 12 with a mission. And he deployed a group of people to go do exactly what he taught them. And I think with any leader, with any organization, whether it's a business, a youth ministry, a lead pastor of a church, you have to develop leaders. And the key is you develop leaders the same way you develop people. You know their story, you build them up, you speak life into them, you nurture those relationships, and then you just transfer the heart of whatever your vision is to those people and then empower them with the tools to go fulfill that mission.
So good. I guarantee you that you and I both know people that it's conspicuous that they're not people-oriented people. I'm of the conviction that if you're not a people-oriented person, it's kind of hard to be in the ministry and at least sustain a good, solid ministry. Now, for me, Sean, people are my thing. I love it. I wake up asking myself, who can I connect with today? Who can I have lunch with today? Who can I spend time with today? I am a people-oriented guy. But for the person that's listening, that I'm a hermit. I don't like people. I don't want to be around people. Let's for a minute just kind of talk about some of the ways that we can offer forms of encouragement for them to see. Like, for example, I'll start. I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to ask God for us to see people the way that he sees people. God sees people as being so valuable that he gave his only begotten son. That's how much he cared about people. And I know that this is like one of the most simple things, and you probably didn't push play on this podcast episode just to hear me give you something so simple, but it's so profound, it's powerful. It starts by praying over them. It literally is this idea of praying over yourself, asking God to help you learn to be a lover of people. We get it. People are hard. I've often been told, and I believe it, ministry would be wonderful if it wasn't for people. But ministry wouldn't be ministry without them. It's what we do. It's who we are. And it can at times be hard to love complicated people. But to that person that's just like, I am not a people person, I'm going to say don't get in the ministry, because it is the two things that God hands every minister is his word and his people, which I think are the two things that God loves the most, his word and his people. And to bring those two things together on a weekly basis is nothing short of one of the most amazing and beautiful things that I do. But if you had a youth pastor come to you and say, look, I feel like God has called me to do this, but I just have a hard time connecting and loving them and being involved with their lives, where would I start? What would you say to him? Just a quick answer.
I think you have to consider that the Bible says that there's so much power in our words, that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And you have to consider that every idle word that you speak to a person is either bringing life or it's bringing death. It's building them up or tearing them down. And so carrying with you, let's say you're not a people person. Let's say you're not even in the ministry and you're just like, I'm convinced that I need to nurture relationships, and I need to understand that life is just a people-oriented situation.
Yes, absolutely.
Your words carry so much weight. And that is something that you can just practice every single day, every interaction. People are going to remember less about what you say, but more about how you made them feel. And your words are so much a part of that.
Yeah.
How is that person feeling after they interact with you? And that, to me, doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert.
Yes, it's good words. Let's kind of wrap this up with some practical advice. And I'm going to just pop off a list of some pretty simple things. And I want you to just kind of pop off a word of encouragement or a word of advice amongst them. I think we're obviously today talking about people over programs and building relational ministries. And one of the first things that I would say about that is that relationships cannot be an afterthought. They have to be the lifeblood of your ministry. They have to be the lifeblood. It's not something that you're like, oh yeah, I have to speak to them, or oh yeah, I need to recognize them, or oh yeah, I need to go out of my way to speak to them. It's not an afterthought. It is the lifeblood. So with that being said, let me pop off 3 or 4 comments, and I want you to comment between each one. Number 1, we all need to build ministries and businesses where people matter more than the processes. Talk about it.
I think there's such a temptation to get lost in the calendar, to get lost in the processes, lost in the structure, where you lose the human touch.
Yes.
In the age of AI, in the age of technology, you can tech your way out of actually remembering that it's a people business.
Yes.
And we can never, ever, ever forget that.
Yeah. People more than programs. Number 2, I think it's important that in every ministry or in every business that we understand that conversations matter more than checklists. Because you and I both know at a busy church where we keep office hours, we come to work. It's our ministry, but it's also a job. It's easy to get caught up on the checklist mentality, but those conversations with people on those Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings and Sunday nights or any other special events, conversations over checklist. That's the communication part.
You have to be so intentional. You have to understand we only get so many words in this life. You may be dealing with a person who visited your church, or you may have a church member who they've come into church and they've told themselves, this is the last time I'm visiting. If this and this and this doesn't happen, I'm not coming back. And you are the person who spoke life into them on their way out. and you will never understand the magnitude of the weight that can carry. And so I think being so intentional, understanding that we will give an account for every idle word that we speak. And as leaders, we live under that microscope, and our words are scrutinized, and they carry more weight than other people. We just have to live with that. But I think being so intentional is very important.
Yes. One of the big things here at the church, number 3, discipleship is not an event, it's a lifestyle. And what I mean by that is that every single day is an opportunity to invest into somebody. We used the word nurture a second ago. And obviously discipleship here, we have a discipleship program. We have Anchor Point Ministries. We actually build intentional relationships with people with the hopes to, but it's more than just an event. It's more than just a program. Discipleship can happen in the context of you walking into a youth group with pre-youth group, pre-6:30 start time, a group of boys sitting around a table, and you sitting down and discussing life events. Talk about it. Discipleship, not just as an event, a scheduled routine activity, but as a lifestyle every day.
Listen, discipleship is so much more than just going through a curriculum. It's about getting into their world. It's about understanding what's going on in their life. What's their home like? What are their relationships with their parents like? Or what are the things that they're stressing about?
Wow.
And being just a person that they can trust.
Yeah.
They're not going to feel judged. They're not going to feel unsafe. They're not going to feel like you're going to run and tell your group, about that situation. Absolutely. They just feel safe. And so discipling, you're so right. It's a lifestyle, but you have to invest in that.
Yeah.
And you have to invest time. When you gain a platform of influence, there's a lot of things you sacrifice.
Sure.
And that took me a while to reconcile that, but you lose time. You sacrifice time. You sacrifice the ability to be average.
Yeah. One of the ways that I've learned discipleship over the last few months is when we go out and play basketball with our boys, and that competitive nature kicks in, and I tell them how sissy they are and how soft they are and how weak they are over the cheap fouls that they call us high schoolers, and they don't know nothing about old school, old man basketball. And then I have to go back, and here's the discipleship aspect of it. The competitive nature gets me under conviction. I have to say, guys, I shouldn't have messed with y'all like that. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't let my anger get out of the way. So we say that kind of comically because Sean and I both love playing those, call it whatever you want, intramural sports or, pickleball, basketball with our teen boys, and just getting out there in the spirit of competitiveness and pushing them around, beating them around. And these kids around here, man, they're swaggish. They're a little bit arrogant. And we have to work on humbling them, but then God always humbles us. And it's a discipleship moment where we have to come back around. At least I have to say, guys, sorry I got loud. Sorry I screamed. That was on me. And it's just in that interrelational relationships of really nurturing those every day. Last one, consider this. Church is not a place that you go. It's a family to which you belong. And that is the foundational premise of people over programs, so that people realize that when they're a part of a local assembly of believers, it is a family and it's not just a weekend activity.
I think people just have such a desire to belong to something. And you owe it to the community of believers that God has put in your care to have a very clear mission, a very clear calling. What has God called you to? And it's your obligation to take people with you. And I think that's why people follow Jesus, because he was going somewhere.
Yeah, he was.
He had a clear mission. And when you as a leader have a mission that the people you lead can articulate, they just want to get behind that and go somewhere. They want to belong to something.
Yes. And you think about that mission of Jesus. In conclusion, that mission was amazing in that he tells us, I came to seek and save that which was lost. We know based on what the scripture teaches in the New Testament, he came to fix people that were broken. He came to mend relationships that had been severed. He came to touch bodies that were sick. And here's the thing about the ministry of Jesus, and I have to remind myself this all the time, because if I'm not careful in a growing ministry, I make my daily routines about buildings and budgets, and it's not about that. It's about bodies, and those bodies, they house souls, and those souls represent people. And I love I love the thought that we're carrying today, and I think it's a great reminder for all of us to remember that we have to make sure that we are building ministries, building businesses, building structures with whatever system we have, whether it's our family, whether it's a school, that we're an administrator of something, an owner of a business, a manager. It really does have to be relational. And I think that's what Jesus was all about. Whether he was sitting with the woman at the well or going up into tombstones to meet a maniac, or whether he was looking up in trees and telling Zacchaeus, come down, I'm going to your house today, or he's sitting at a meal with Pharisees, he was a relational guru, and his relationship with people became the gateway for him to be able to get to the heart of what they truly needed. And it's no different for us.
No, I think when you're doing those budget meetings, when you're planning that event, when you're balancing your calendar, you always have to ask yourself, how is this going to build my people?
Yes.
How is this going to lift up the name of Jesus and build the people that God has put in my care?
So good. So good. Well, man, it's been a joy. I hope that something has come out of this from you all today that are listening, and I hope that it will serve as a great blessing to you, not to forget why you got into what you're doing for, and that is simply to allow God to use your life. Sean, every day I wake up, and this is what I want my life. I want my life to bring God glory, and I want it to bring somebody else good. I say it from the pulpit often. I say it in counseling meetings often. I want my life. I got one shot. I got one chance. I want it to bring God glory, and I want it to bring somebody else good, and I cannot do neither unless I make sure that I am building relational ministries. Thank you for tuning in today. Make sure you tune in again. Check us out here at the Between the Trenches podcast, where we allow raw truth and real talk about life, leadership, and ministry be about everything that we do. God bless you. We have a great